10 years from today, Lisa Schneider will trade in her office job to become the leader of a pack of dogs. As the owner of her own dog rescue, that is. A second act made possible by the reskilling courses Lisa's taking now with AARP to help make sure her income lives as long as she does. And she can finally run with the big dogs. And the small dogs, who just think they're big dogs. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Learn more at aarp.org/skills.
Hello and welcome to Away the Podcast. It's Martin here, and you join us for another episode of On This Week, where we take a somewhat meandering look back at events that happened on this week in Sunderland history. There's no Chris with us this week, but we do have the rest of the regular lineup. So first of all, hello to Kelvin Beattie.
Oh, hi, Martin.
How are you this week, Kelvin?
I'm good. I've been on holiday, so I've been away in the Western Isles, up to Islay and Jura and stuff like that.
Very nice, and obviously the listeners can't see this, but you've got a very snazzy holiday shirt on.
I'm still on holiday. My brand new Sunderland blue away strip went down well on the ferries and in the Western Isles.
Very good. And also, it's good to have you back, Kelvin. And also with us this week is Andrew Smithson.
Hello, Martin, and hello to all the lovely lads and lasses out there tuning in to hear us talk Sunderland AFC.
Well, last week, obviously you two weren't here. You were sorely missed, but Gav joined me and Chris, and it was still recorded for 2.5 hours. So it turns out it's me and Chris that's the problem, and nobody else. So if we just clock an hour today, it's completely Chris's fault, and we'll put the blame totally onto him. So we'll kick off and run through everything that's happened on this week in the history of Sunderland. August the 11th to, what are we doing? August the 11th to August the 17th. August the 11th, 1967, Ralph Brand signed from Man City for $5,000. 1979, Chris Turner, who's a favourite of Kelvin, Chris Turner became the first Sunderland keeper to appear as a sub. Also on his debut, he came on for Barry Siddle at half-time in a pre-arranged change in an Anglo-Scottish Cup tie against Oldham Athletic. And that was the start. I know we've talked about Chris Turner a bit on various pods, Kelvin, but that was the start of a good...
great career with us.
A very good career for Chris Turner at Sunderland, wasn't it?
He was a smashing goalie, Chris Turner. Smashing.
He was always somebody who... I missed Chris Turner at Sunderland, but as soon as I started going to matches and becoming aware of what was going on around in football, Chris Turner was at Man U, and you always looked in the sticker books and saw signed from Sunderland. So you always kept an eye out for Chris Turner. And he was always somebody who I hoped would come back to the club one day. And I think he was linked a little bit, but it never transpired that he actually arrived back at Roker Park, did it?
Well, I had two good goalies at the time. Barry Siddle wasn't a bad goalkeeper,
Yeah.
But Turner was a top draw goalkeeper, Chris Turner.
On August 11th, 1990, we got beat 4-1 in the friendly off Torpedo Moscow at Roker Park. And this was, we'd obviously just got promoted, and this was the pre-season revving us up quickly for a season of Division 1 action. And a few years ago, Chris and I had the pleasure of speaking to Viv Busby for a podcast that unfortunately actually never went out. But Viv was telling us, and obviously it's very sadly Viv passed away a couple of years ago, didn't he? But Viv was telling us that they got into this match against Torpedo Moscow at Roker Park. Borley, I think it was Borley's first game at Roker Park. We signed from Portsmouth that summer. And I think Borley had a little bit of trouble settling in to some extent. He looked a little nervous on the pitch. He scored no own goal in this game. The defence shipped 4. I remember Viv saying to me and Chris, we were thinking, what the hell have we got here? And obviously the way Kevin Ball's career panned out at Sunderland was exceptionally good, but anybody who was there that night and remembers that game would not have had the highest of hopes of Kevin Ball succeeding at the club. So it just shows first impressions aren't always right.
Yeah, I recall there was a lot of rushing about.
First one. Well, we're not even 4 minutes in, Kelvin. You've got your first one in. 1998, 2 goals by Danny Dichio got us a victory over York City in the League Cup at Bootham Crescent. It was only his 17th game for the club, so he was doing pretty well. Neil Wainwright also made his debut in that game. And 2007 was the day that Sunderland again returned to the top flight. Had an early kickoff against Spurs. Michael Chopra scored, beat Spurs 1-0 in the televised game. Craig Gordon, we'd only signed a couple of days earlier for the club. Paul McShane, Dixon Tuhu, and Kieran Richardson all made their debuts, and we were top of the league for a couple of hours anyway, as we had the early kickoff. August the 12th, 1904, goalkeeper Teddy Doig transferred to Liverpool for £150 after a record of 457 games for the club and 4 Division 1 Championship medals. It's not a bad haul for a Sunderland player, is it? 457 games and 4 title medals.
Very good.
1961, Brian Clough scored twice in a 3-1 win over Aarhus in a pre-season friendly at Roker Park. That gave him 4 goals in his first 2 games for Sunderland. 1978, Gordon Chisholm and Ian Watson made their debuts in a 2-1 Anglo-Scottish Cup defeat at Sheffield United. And in 1995, we started the season at Roker Park with a 2-1 defeat against Leicester. Now, I'll let you in on a little bit of background to how we put these pods together. We've got a load of things from different dates that we talk about. We put it out to the lads and say, right, take your pick. What do you want to talk about? What's the thing that you want to focus on? There's so many really interesting things that have happened on this week in Sunderland history. And Andrew said, I want to talk about a 2-1 defeat against Leicester City in 1995. So I haven't asked why, I haven't asked what, I haven't asked if he's feeling all right. So Andrew, Sunderland 1, Leicester City 2, August 12th, 1995.
Well, Martin, we're going to have to talk about Sunderland defeats eventually, because otherwise we're going to run out of
we don't have to. We don't have to.
I'm like you. I actually don't often enjoy remembering defeats, but this game I think had a lot of interesting side points to it. And of course, it was the first game of the 95-96 season, which actually finished pretty well for Sunderland under Peter Reid. It's probably my favourite season of supporting the team. It was my first season as a season ticket holder, teenage lad, so kind of life was exciting, and you were looking forward to the weekends. And I remember queuing up, as I say, it was my first season as a season ticket holder. Me and a couple of lads, a couple of me mates from school, bought tickets for the main stand paddocks. And I remember queuing up to go into the game. And normally, first game of the season, you're excited about the football. I vividly remember talking in that queue about the big battle in the charts. Do you remember when Blur and Oasis they both released their singles the following Monday, and it was already brewing to be this big this big battle of the two Britpop bands.
Yeah.
So there we were arguing over no, I think you'll find
whose side were you on?
Well, yeah, exactly. I was definitely on the Oasis side then. Although more recently, I saw Blur at Wembley a couple of years ago, and I've grown to appreciate Blur. Blur a lot more nowadays. But yeah, it was this big talking point, and I just remember having this argument in the queue. it just nothing to do with the team or whether Sunderland were going to have a decent season or not. But yeah, that's when football's at its best. When you're getting into your football, you're getting into music, you're going to games with your mates. So it was an exciting time. As for the team, maybe this is why we weren't talking about it too much before kickoff, but there hadn't been much in terms of new signings. It was Reid's first full season. He'd been made permanent manager, having kind of staved off relegation after being brought in towards the end of the previous season. And I don't think we quite knew what to expect. We certainly didn't start the season, I don't think, expecting promotion. Is that fair, gents? Is that how you remember it, that season?
Oh, 100%. We just scraped survival, really, hadn't we? Peter Reid had done a marvellous job keeping us up. But really, it was only Paul Bracewell who he actually brought in that pre-season, wasn't it? So he hadn't had the money to strengthen the squad or even sort of trade players out and bring new faces in. So it was very much continuation of the team that had played the season before. So you're kind of wondering what on earth's going to happen. It was kind of the unknown, wasn't it? There was no expectation, but I think given the season end that Reid had overseen, you had a little bit of hope that something might be a bit different, but you just didn't know, did you?
No.
Well, I was quite excited about Bracewell coming in. I haven't seen him in his previous times with his previous periods with Sunderland, so I'm not saying I thought we'd get promoted. I just thought maybe we'll not be involved at the wrong end of the table. That was probably my expectation.
Well, I think that's fair, what you have said there, lads. Perhaps we were a bit more confident about not being in a relegation scrap, but there was still question marks there. And as you say, Martin, Bracewell was the only real arrival. I think we'd signed John Mullen. I think it was just before the season started, but he wasn't necessarily expected to be a major player.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, he was at that point going to be one for the future, maybe. So, yeah, there was this kind of odd sense around the place about what is this season going to bring. We did have a decent crowd in. There was about 18,500 in Roker Park that day when we played Leicester, which was the second highest in the division on that afternoon. And when you consider the previous year, our home form, particularly under Mick Buxton, had been dire. So a few fans had turned up, a few extra fans had turned up, which you often get at the start of the season. But it certainly wasn't this feeling of, oh, here we go, we're going to have a real good go this season. The starting 11 against Leicester just proves what you said, Martin, about how Bracewell had been the only real signing. Bracewell, technically, you could say he was a debutant. Or debutant? How do you which ones? He made his debut, basically, but it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't even his genuine debut because, as Kelvin says, he's appeared at Sunderland plenty of times before that. So the starting 11 was Chamberlain in goal, Kubicki, Ball, Ord, and Scott. You then had Michael Gray, Bracewell, as we said, Agnew, Martin Smith. And up front was Phil Gray, and I wonder if either of you want to have a stab at who played up front alongside Phil Gray.
I know this one because I spoke to him for a piece on the website not so long ago, but Kelvin, you might want to have a guess.
Feel like I should know it as well because I was actually at that game, and I cannot think.
Well, it wasn't Damon Albarn or one of the Gallagher brothers. It was Brett Angel, who you kind of forget was. I don't really associate him with the Peter Reid era, but he was around at the start then and got a few appearances under Reid. But you had Gordon Armstrong coming on as a sub. You had Craig Russell coming on as a sub. And you had Lee Howie, who remained on the bench. So these were all players that we all knew really well. There wasn't any new faces there or any kind of players that you might have thought, oh, this is an exciting new lad. What we're going to get from him.
The one that would probably almost fall into that category was Brett Angel, wasn't it? Because we'd signed him, 650 grand or something from Everton in the March when the transfer deadline was towards the end of March, wasn't it, rather than in January. And he'd come from Everton injured, so he hadn't really had a great deal of football at peak fitness, and he was always somebody who caused us problems when he was playing for Southend. He got a big money move to Everton, hadn't quite worked out for him, but he'd come into Sunderland, and that pre-season, he was really fit, and he'd scored a lot of goals in pre-season. So I think the hope was that Angel would see a completely different sort of side to Brett Angel, and Peter really put a little bit of faith in him. Whether that was forced because he hadn't been able to bring in another striker, or whether it was out with choice, I don't really know. But I remember talking to Brett Angel for a piece on the website, and he said it was a combination of factors, really. He'd come injured and struggled to get fully fit at the end of that season. He had either one or two very young kids at the time. The kids and his missus were still living in Formby, I think. He was living in a hotel in Durham. And it was just like, it's actually the wrong move. So I think he went on loan to Sheffield United a few weeks after this.
Yeah, that rings a bell. I mean, certainly that can happen to any player. We only ever see what's happening on the pitch, and we're almost oblivious to what's happening in their family lives. And that's bound to have an impact. If you're not seeing your kids every day, and or you're missing your wife or whatever it is, that is going to have an effect on you. But yeah, as Martin says, he'd done quite a bit in pre-season. I remember he actually was going and doing additional training sessions just by himself as well. So he was committed, if nothing else. It didn't work out for him at Sunderland, but he did try and give himself a decent chance at making it happen. But yes, he's...
So there's another little interesting aside to Brett Angel in this season for Sunderland. Because as I say, I'm sure he went on loan to Sheffield United around October, November time. He came back to Sunderland, and he went out on loan again to West Brom. And he actually played against us in our last home game of the season. I think he came off the bench for West Brom against us. And in those days, loan players could actually play against the parent club. There wasn't any restrictions to ban that, So it's you never really associate Brett Angel at all with this season. But he started the season in red and white, played the first couple of games. I think he scored his only goal for the club in midweek after this at Preston.
He did, yeah.
But then he finished the season playing at Roker Park, but he was lining up in the opposition's shirt.
Well, there you go. See, I told you, Martin, there was going to be plenty of nice little...
we can always find something, can't we?
Yeah, there was always going to be a couple of things we could talk about. So there you go. That was Sunderland. We weren't sure what to expect that season. First game against Leicester, who'd only just been relegated. Now, they were expected to be involved in the promotion push. And spoiler alert, come the end of the season, both Leicester and Sunderland do get promoted. On this particular day, Leicester had Steve Walsh playing for them, who in more recent times was an assistant, I believe, under Martin O'Neill. I think he's had quite a good partnership with Martin O'Neill over the years. They also had Jamie Lawrence playing for them, who you might both remember was the player we signed from a rather unusual route when he got released from prison. So Jamie Lawrence was playing for them, and he was involved in the opening goal. I think there was a bit of like a scramble on the edge of the box. The ball's broken for Steve Corica, who I don't know if he's a popular name where you are, Martin, over in Australia. I think he was Australian international. He blasted it in to put Leicester 1-0 up. We equalised after half an hour, and it was somebody who we'd actually signed from Leicester. That was Steve Agnew, who I think we might have spoke about him before, Kelvin. I think you gave him the nickname Spiro Agnew. I liked him. He was a good player, and it was a good finish. I don't know if you remember the goal, gents, but again, there'd been a bit of a scramble. The ball's come bouncing out to the edge of the box. And despite there being two defenders on the line, he's managed to find the corner of the net. At that point, we deserved to be level. But from then onwards, I think we kind of went back into old habits. We started playing long ball a lot. We were a bit wasteful in possession. Come the second half, you could tell that Leicester had been playing in the division above us the year before. They looked a level above. They scored a pretty good winner from Mark Robbins, who is another person who's had links with Sunderland in later years. He kind of seemed to have the hex over us as a manager for a long time. He's turned in quite like a tight little pocket of space and found the corner with his shot with about 20 minutes to go. After that, we had a lot of the ball, but we didn't really know what to do with it. And as you're walking away from the ground, beforehand, as I say, there was this whole question mark about where's this season going to go. I think leaving Roker, me and my mates had stopped arguing about whether it was going to be Roll With It or Country House making number one. And we were a bit downhearted about Sunderland. It wasn't the best way to start the season. Come the Monday, though, and this is something that I don't really remember. Come the Monday morning, it's in the Echo there. Peter Reid was yet again going back in for Chris Waddle. So I think you said, Martin, there wasn't a lot of money floating around, but we must have had some cash.
Well, we must have, because a couple of months later, we obviously paid, 900 grand going to $1 million for David Kelly. So there was obviously something there for Reid to use, which it kind of makes it all the more surprising that we didn't actually do more business that summer.
Reid often had this sense of, well, if I can't get who I want, I'll just not get anybody. That was a trait of his throughout his early years as a Sunderland manager. But yeah, apparently he was going back in for Waddle. We also, on that Monday, had a forward called Ludwig Kogel coming in on trial. Now, I've done a bit of digging on him. And when I say digging, I mean looking on Wikipedia. I'm not going to try and pretend I've done too much research. But about a decade earlier, he'd had a couple of caps for West Germany. So he was obviously half decent. But that was another thing Reid liked to do. He liked to bring players in on trial for a couple of weeks, and then you never heard of them again until some idiot like me likes to drag their name up, 30 odd years later. The other story on the back of the Echo was that the club were appealing the decision not to be given a work permit for Brad Friedel.
Yeah.
So maybe the money Reid did have, he wanted to keep aside, because he never really liked Chamberlain, I don't think.
No.
He was never set on him. So perhaps goalkeeping was the position he wanted to nail down. So yeah, we'd been knocked back the permission to sign Brad Friedel, which was a bit of a surprise because he was an American international and we thought he was going to meet the criteria for a permit. As I say, the club at this point had announced that they were going to appeal the decision and see if they could get it reversed. But it was an important time for me because we weren't sure what the direction was going to be. We weren't sure if we had money, and if we did, who we were going to spend it on. But yet from that point onwards, you mentioned Brett Angel scored in the League Cup. In the second leg at Roker Park, we came from 2 goals behind to win when Lee Howie got a couple of goals. Things suddenly started picking up from that rather downbeat mood. Home form, crucially for Peter Reid, turned out to be brilliant. We did lose to Leicester on the opening day, but I think we only lost once more in the league all season. And Roker Park became a real fortress. We even had Liverpool and Man United coming to us that season in the Cups, and we gave them a good game. So it was a defeat and it was a poor way to start the season, but we very quickly bounced back from that and ended up having one of the best seasons ever. And like you said, Martin, by the end of it, Brett Angel, in a nice kind of bit of symmetry there, is still on the scene. Is Sunderland are winning the title. So hopefully I've justified my selection there, Martin, and
No, you
given
have.
us
And
enough to talk about.
You know, when
Sorry, go on, Kelvin.
Angel went to West Brom, was he flying there? Or?
He
Oh,
obviously thought they needed some divine intervention, didn't they?
Hey, heaven help us. One of the things about the season, you know, the solidity at home. I didn't see too many away games that season, but I did see loads of games at home. One of the ingredients there, I thought the Reid worked on the spine of the team. I definitely think it was one of Andy Melville's best ever seasons. That he for me he was one of our unsung heroes in that team for me. Real cultured centre half he was, and a grand ability to use the ball as well.
Interestingly enough, he didn't play this game. It was Kevin Ball and Ord in defence. So I don't know if he started the season injured or did he have to play his way into Reid's thinking? I can't remember now.
I don't know why he was missing that game. I'm pretty sure he did. I know that he wasn't playing.
Yes.
And then, yeah.
You're right. You're right, though, in that he was a really important part of the team that season. And I honestly think, lads, between us, and it's a shame Chris isn't here, Andy Melville gets a hell of a lot of mentions on this podcast. He's up there along the likes of Clough and what have you for mentions, I think. He's obviously very popular with us all.
The following week away at Norwich, Melville was on the bench. And our next home game in the league was Wolves at home. Graham Taylor was manager of Wolves. And Melville scored in the 8th minute and we won 2-0. And that was the game that Jeff Thomas got sent off really late on. He clattered somebody, didn't he? I can't remember who he clattered.
I think he got in a bit of a battle with Phil Gray because Phil Gray, as he was getting stretchered off, I'm pretty sure the ref booked Phil Gray for his involvement.
Yeah, right.
But everybody was cheering him to the rafters because seconds later, Thomas was having to trot off and get himself to the change rooms. I remember against Wolves, we had a couple of heated moments round then. I remember there was a game when we had a couple of players sent off at Molineux. There was the whole thing with John DeWolf and Lee Howie had like a running battle for a couple of seasons. So those games were pretty tasty. And I think if I'm right in saying that the win against Wolves was the first league victory of the season, and from then on we started to see this momentum and this whole Peter Reid era starting to really take shape and had a massive impact in the years to come.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. There's a couple of little asides in the Leicester lineup as well. So you mentioned Steve Corica before, Andrew, who was the Leicester goal scorer. That was his Leicester debut. He'd been signed from a club called Marconi Stallions in Australia. So that was his Leicester debut. Mark McGee had signed him. So he scored within however many minutes of his debut against us. He only played 16 or 17 games for Leicester. And the reason for that is Mark McGee left Leicester to join Wolves. So the Wolves, who we mentioned just a second ago, Graham Taylor was manager there. I think he got the boot from Wolves. He spent an awful lot of money. He spent money on Don Goodman, for example, the season before. And Graham Taylor got sacked. Mark McGee went to Wolves. And the first thing he did was go back to Leicester to get Steve Corica. So Corica is probably, people will remember him more for playing for Wolves in English football because he had quite a long career at Wolves. But yeah, he started with Leicester. And when I first came over to Australia, I used to go I was living in Sydney. I used to go and watch Sydney FC. And Steve Corica had finished his career at Sydney and then became a coach. And he's had a few spells as manager. I think he had about 5 or 6 years, most recently as manager of Sydney FC. The other interesting thing, which I always find it really interesting when you see different periods of football kind of collide, if you like. So Kevin Poole was in the goal for Leicester that day, playing behind defence. Simon Grayson with hair and other people like that were in front of him. Kevin Poole was a goalkeeper who had been around for a long time. So I think he was maybe 32 two at this stage. So he'd had a long spell at Aston Villa where I think he was behind Nigel Spink. He had a long spell at Borough where he was reserved to Stephen Pears for a long time. He'd gone to Leicester and he'd got some first team football at Leicester. He ended up having quite a long career at Leicester. He'd been at Leicester for 3 or 4 seasons at this point. But if you fast forward to 2014, so almost 20 years after this, he's at Burton Albion. And he was still registered as a player, age 50. So in October 2013, he was on the bench and in and out of the squad. A lone goalkeeper who was in Burton Albion's team, keeping him out the team at the time, got recalled, and that was Jordan Pickford. So Kevin Poole came back into the Burton side to replace Jordan Pickford, who'd been recalled by Sunderland. So that's not one generation. To me, that's at least 2 generations apart. Where those footballing worlds are colliding. I just love little things like that. Bring it all together.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think you get that with goalkeepers, don't you? They will keep on playing for a long time. But like you, I really enjoy those connections, and somebody who, I think Peter Shilton, he must have something like that where he must have played with the likes of, I don't know, could he have been around in Bobby Moore's time for England, maybe?
Well, he was. Didn't he just miss out on the 1970
possibly, yeah.
He did.
Yeah. And then, so you've got him, he's playing in that era, and yet I vividly remember him playing in the 90s.
No, that's exactly right, yeah.
He was another goalkeeper like Kevin Poole who looked after himself and wanted to still be in the game. I think Shilton maybe had a little less of a popular welcome at Roker than Kevin Poole ever did. I don't think Kevin Poole's personal life was ever the subject of terrace chanting.
Just say one word, Tina, and we'll move on. 13th of August 1933, Don Kitchen-Brand was born in South Africa, a Sunderland centre-forward in the 1950s. Now, this one is intriguing to me, and I don't know if either of you know anything about it. So if anybody does know something about it, please let us know. 1974, Don Revie opened an exhibition at the Sunderland Arts Centre called A History of Sunderland AFC. Now, it's a year after we beat Leeds in the FA Cup. There's a rivalry between Bob Stokoe and Don Revie. Don Revie's history with Sunderland's well documented, the history with Leeds is well documented. It seems a strange choice to invite to open an exhibition about the history of Sunderland Football Club.
It does seem like an odd choice. And to make it even more confusing, I spoke about this event to Rob Mason, who we've had on the pod before, lads. I thought that the Sunderland Arts Centre was just what the museum was called at the time. The one where the Winter Gardens used to be, and it now is again. It was reconstructed in recent times. Apparently, though, this venue was somewhere completely different in the town centre, and I can't even remember where it is now. So again, if people are listening in and know exactly where this exhibition was held, I'd be interested to know, because it wasn't one of the buildings that I grew up associating like Sunderland culture with at all. So they've picked a rather odd venue, and they've picked a rather odd guest for the opening of the event there.
Was he the England manager by that point?
Maybe. I thought it was a bit early for him to be.
Me too. I was just playing with that in my head, trying to figure out.
Very high profile manager, wasn't he? He was. He just won the league title. Actually, maybe he was. So 1974, he won the First Division title, and then he left Leeds to become England manager. So yes, he would have been.
Very good.
He was the New England manager.
Right.
Which makes some more sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You can't see Thomas Tuchel turning up at the Glass Centre anytime soon, though, to cut the ribbon on on a art show, I don't think.
I think Revy might have enjoyed the snubbing his snook at Bob Stokoe, though.
Well, yeah.
Coming back into town and doing that and cocking his head at Stokoe's direction.
I don't think the mystery is him accepting it. I think the mystery is him being offered it in the first place.
Being offered it, yeah.
Oh,
especially after the season we'd had the season before, and
right.
I mean that would be our European season as well, wouldn't it? An odd one.
So if anybody was there or anybody remembers that or has any more information about that one, drop us a line and let us know. In 1988, on the 13th of August, we played a friendly at Roker Park against Seattle Storm. We won that match 3-0. Marco, Gary Bennett and John McPhail from the spot with the goals. McPhail also had 2 penalties saved by the Seattle Storm goalkeeper, Jeff Koch, which I don't know if he was angry about that or not, but there seemed to be a little bit of controversy at the end of the game. A fella called Peter Hattrup for Seattle was sent off after the full-time whistle. So, again, I can't remember I don't think I went to that game. I can't remember what was going on with Peter Hattrup to make him so angry at the end of a friendly game. But, yeah, I think it was George Tyson who was the referee, sent him off. 2003, we had a League Cup tie at Mansfield Town. Kevin Kyle scored for both sides in the last 2 minutes to turn. Well, we were winning 1-0. Kyle equalised for Mansfield and he scored for us. It was also Torre Andre Flo's last game for us. 2005.
Hurrah.
Well, yes, indeed. 2005, a loosely titled striker, Andy Gray, scored a goal on his debut. I think we talked about this game last week a little bit for some reason or other, but it was 3-1 home defeat against Charlton. I think. Oh, that's right. It was Darren Bent. We talked about Darren Bent last week, and Darren Bent was in the Charlton lineup because I think Charlton and us had both Charlton us gone up, or had Charlton gone up earlier than that, but they'd beaten us to the signing of Darren Bent, and that summer we'd wanted to sign him from Ipswich. But Kelvin Davis, Tommy Miller, John Stead, Andy Gray made the debuts, which is an illustrious lineup of names in our history. Nyren also made his debut. I'm not including him in that list because Nyren turned out to be good, but I remember his first touch, he came on the sub, didn't he? And he was playing right back, and right in front of the East stand, somebody passed him the ball, and he went to trap it, and it rolled under his foot. And that was Nyren's introduction to the Stadium of Light. 2011, we played Liverpool away, drew 1-1. Seb Larson scored. Jordan Henderson made his debut for Liverpool. Wes Brown, Larson, David Vaughan, and G scored. I'm sorry, didn't score. They made the debuts for us. Actually, G's just signed for a club out here in Australia. I saw a post yesterday. He's a club that's based out of Sydney called MacArthur United, and G's signed for them. And on social media, all of the comments about G's arrival reference that Man City goal, which, however many years later, it's still the first thing that people think of. Oh, the other one that people reference, and it wasn't just Sunderland Sport, there was people from around the world who like football. The other incident that made it into the comments was when he ducked out that header against Crystal Palace and Di Canio dragged him off, but 99% of them were referencing the goal where he skipped around Joe Hart from a definitely onside position. Jordan Henderson made his debut for Liverpool in that game after signing from us. There was another former Sunderland player in the Liverpool starting 11 that day. Do you want to take a guess at who that was?
I think I know who it is. Kelvin, do you want to go, or are you happy for me to? After the build-up, I want to say it was Mignolet, was it?
No, it wasn't.
Oh, no. Oh, I really should have let you then answer, Kelvin, and save myself the embarrassment.
Give us a clue.
Yeah.
He played for us on loan, would be a clue. A few seasons before this.
Not Dominic Matteo.
It wasn't. That's a good shout. Stuart Downing was a player who was in the Liverpool starting lineup that day, who had also turned out for Sunderland. I'm just having a quick look here because I'm wondering who was in goal for us. Yeah, Mignolet was in goal for us
Mm.
that day. Pepe Reina was still about for Liverpool at that time.
So it was right.
Right,
I'll take
he
I'll take that as being right.
we'll have to listen back to see how you phrased it. If you just said Simon Mignolet plays, then you're absolutely correct. Yeah, Suarez missed the penalty.
He put a canny shift in for us down in when he was with us.
I thought he was fantastic. I really did. He was one of those loan players who I really wanted us to keep. But again, it was something going back to the point that we were talking about early before that, in that summer before that Leicester game that Andrew was talking about. Because he didn't have the transfer windows, there wasn't as much onus during the summer to actually make a raft of transfers, was there? You could keep building and buying players until March came around. The end of March came around. Or was it the third Thursday in March? I seem to remember the transfer deadline. It was something like that. But there wasn't as much onus to actually flog a load of players and get players in and have your squad set. So you can kind of understand why Reid was waiting for decisions on Friedel, waiting to see if he could sign Chris Waddle and stuff like that. But, similarly with Downing coming on loan, you don't get those month-long loans anymore because of the transfer windows. And Downing came in for a month. I think we wanted to keep him for another 2. He'd done so well for us that Middlesbrough recalled him and put him back into the team. But yeah, he was always somebody who I'd, even after he'd left, and there was some talk of him coming back at some point, wasn't there? You kind of think he was such a good player.
I was just going to say that. I'm pretty sure after he went back to Borough, wasn't it? Did we not go back in for him again? Or was it just paper talk? I can't remember that. But he put a good shift in for it.
No, he was good. He had goals in him as well, didn't he? Which I know it's an obvious thing to say, but as a midfield player, attacking midfield player, I always like that sense that somebody's got a goal in them. And there was a game at the Stadium of Light, and I can't remember if this was his first goal for us, but he took a penalty late on in the game. And I always remember being really impressed that he'd had the gumption, the bollocks to just grab the ball and take the penalty. I can't remember who it was against, so I'll have a look at that at some point. But and to me, that's just one of those things that sums up character. You've actually got something about you. You've got a good bit of nous about you. Take some responsibility. And yeah, he went on to have a good career. August 13, 2016 was David Moyes' first game, which 2-1 defeat at Man City. For a little while, I thought, it's looking all right here. I think we went 1-0 down early on, didn't we? But we scored an equaliser. I think, maybe it's not going to be too bad, but it was.
It was.
I wish people could see Martin's face right now. His new look, absolutely heartbroken.
Yeah. Well,
I almost lulled into starting to argue with you there. I thought you were going to say it.
I don't think there's any argument, isn't it? And it's took us 9 years to come around to some semblance of redemption, which we've finally got.
Do you know, honestly, he has an admission. I can remember early into the season being dragged into one of the phone-in shows and putting a case forward to give Moyes some time and that he would turn it around.
It was you defending them.
Damn,
there were about 10 callers after us absolutely slated us.
I think, in fairness, the Man City game that we're just touching on there, didn't they score a bit of a fluky winner? I feel as if
it was no goal. It was a Paddy McNair goal.
Yeah, I do recall feeling a little bit hard done to in that particular game. And hey, listen, had we come away with a point, it could have all been so different. and Kelvin wouldn't have had to have gone on the radio and defended the honour of
Beattie's case.
And I've just had to check back. It was a game against Wigan on Tuesday night, the 2nd of December 2003. Julio had got sent off at half time, so we were down to 10 men. Jason DeVos scored for Wigan with 20 minutes to go. We got a penalty with 8 minutes left. DeVos got sent off, presumably for giving away the penalty. And there was some experienced players on the field there, including Jeff Whitley. But fortunately, Stuart Downing grabbed the ball and scored the penalty. So there you go, 1-1. Jamie Lawrence came on sub for Wigan that day. So there's another little connection for you. August the 13th, 2017, we beat Norwich away 3-1. And, if you're talking about looking at hope, or looking for some bits of hope to grab onto, this was the hope in that season, wasn't it? Simon Grayson had come in. Aidan McGeady scored a lovely goal. Graben had scored 2 for us, and he'd scored an own goal. We beat Norwich 3-1. You go, maybe this will be all right, actually. Maybe we'll turn it around. But obviously, we didn't. 2020.
Again, there's that heartbroken face of yours, Martin. Oh, dear.
I tell you what, there's a few people. David Moyes, Danny Dickio, and Simon Grayson can get that response from me. 2022, we played QPR. So this was our first season back up in the Championship. Alex Neil was manager. We played QPR. We were 2-0 up pretty early on. Ross Stewart and Ellis Sims scoring. Michael Beale was in charge of QPR that day. Elias Chair got a goal back on 87. And then Sonny Diang scored a last-minute header to rescue a point for Michael Beale. And I always remember listening to Michael Beale's interview after that game, and he was so smug and cocky and saying they were the best side, and I don't know how we ended up needing a goalkeeper to score a goal because we should have battered them. And a few months later, or 18 months later, he rocks back up the stadium light, doesn't he?
Yeah.
There's the hat trick. There's the hat trick. Who's this from, Martin?
I'm actually discovering more and more doing these pods the names that make me feel really depressed.
Quick, Kelvin, mention somebody good. Mention Brian or somebody. Come on.
Oh, you've got me in my cups here, man. Bloody hell.
Kevin Phillips. There you go.
There we go. Right.
He was all right, wasn't he?
He was. Right, we're going to take a very short break. We'll be back very soon. Okay, welcome back to On This Week. And you left us about to enter the 14th of August, 1971. Bobby Park suffered a broken leg in a 1-1 draw with Birmingham in front of what was Roker Park's lowest accurately recorded opening day crowd. 9,749 people were there in tipping down rain, Kelvin.
It was, and I was one of those people that was there. It was a horrible, horrible day that, and we were actually on the point of turning round on the Tyne Bridge on the way to the game because we thought the game had been cancelled.
Yeah,
and
right.
Somebody waved at us and said the thumbs up, the game's on, and we just followed them in. It was a terrible, terrible day. One of those days what was that about? And I think the word had gone out round the town that the game was off. I seem to recall, in the follow-up on the Sunday and the Monday, like people being angry because somehow they'd had this message. The game had been cancelled. But, although it looked a bad injury when Bobby Park went off, you had no sense that you weren't gonna see him again. For people that did see him play, and that didn't see him play, he was going to be a smashing young player. He had great versatility. He was actually playing fullback that day, but he could play like on the left, he could play on the right, he could play right wing. He was playing fullback that day. That's how versatile he was. He's a lovely footballer, Bobby Park. I think a lot of people had high hopes for him. But his leg was broken, and if I remember rightly, he was on his way back in 72, 73 and broke it again in training, if I'd remembered that rightly. Terribly unfortunate to lose a player like that. It was a bad season, that, because we lost Bobby Park at the start of the season and Martin Harvey coming towards the end of the season with a career-ending injury. But it was a terrible day. It was a horrible day.
Do you remember, Kelvin, we've spoken in the past about, Brian Clough, actually, and how he was injured on Boxing Day and perhaps the game had to go ahead because there was a big crowd in and what have you. Do you think that had that not been the opening game of the season and the club hadn't just gone a couple of months without any gate receipts, because they were much more important then, is there a suggestion that the game could have been postponed if it wasn't? Back in them days, gate receipts were really important. And if you've just gone the whole summer without any matches at Roker Park, you want the season to start on time, because those people coming through the gates and paying their entrance fee, they don't pay for season tickets in the same way we do now. They're paying on the day. The club need that money and they need it as soon as possible.
I think it did catch everybody out. I think it was torrential storm almost that caught loads of people out. Well, I don't think it was expected. I don't know whether the club, the assumption there, I guess, is that the club could exert pressure on the referee and get the game played if, really, I always assume that the referee is the one that's got the final call on that. And I don't know how much guidance they would have back then. But it was like Clough, it was a tragic decision to play the game, and it was a horrible game as well. It wasn't even like, because sometimes on a right clatchy pitch, you get a bit of entertainment. People are trying to do stuff and falling on their arse, and keepers are trying to jump and getting stuck in the mud and stuff like that. And it's a form of entertainment. But honestly, that day it was just horrible, a horrible game to watch. And as things would turn out, a horrible day for Bobby Park. And for Sunderland, I would say, when you think of where we were at the time with a clutch of young players coming through, I think there really was high hopes for Bobby Park. I think he had his...
Sorry, Cal, I was just going to say, he's a young player, 19-year-old, this one, he's played 72 games. So he'd come into the team and got a lot of football at a young age, hadn't he?
Yeah. His versatility, as I say, he could play. He played a lot of games on the right wing for Sunderland, but I saw him play inside, left-hand side, forward. I saw him play fullback, midfield. He was very, very versatile and sharp over the ground, but he was tall and you might argue stick thin. There wasn't a hell of a lot on him, but I tell you, he was a brave boy. He was feisty. He'd go in for tackles. He'd jump for headers. He was feisty like that. He was really well liked by the crowd for that Bobby Park. He'd put a shift in for you wherever you played him. I think him and Richie Pitt had their testimonials together, if I remember rightly.
They did, Kelvin, but it was several years after. So bless him, he has had a torrid time trying to get back to a level where he could play. A horrible situation for him.
Yeah, not good. A good young'un that we didn't get the chance to see the finish of, if you want. Yeah.
Now, there's a few of them littered around Sunderland history, isn't there? 1993, we talked about this a little bit last week. That's summer where Terry Butcher made all the signings. Somebody drove around a roundabout. But this was the first game of the season, and Alec Chamberlain, Derek Ferguson and Andy Melville all recovered to some extent to take on Derby County at the baseball ground. Arthur Cox was Derby's manager, who again, we mentioned him a little bit last week. Lee Power came on as sub at half-time. I think Derek Ferguson lasted 20 minutes and had to go off. Ian Rodgers and Phil Gray were the two other signings that summer who didn't make the lineup on this day. Got beat 5-0. Marco scored for Derby and had an exceptionally good game, I seem to recall. I was in Menorca, and I was trying to listen to this match on the World Service. And again, it's one of those things where you talk about now and makes you feel ancient, doesn't it? But obviously no smartphones, no internet. You were trying to tune into the World Service, which is the BBC, the only BBC radio station that was available overseas, and you're trying to get updates on scores. And we got, unfortunately, a lot of coverage then because they kept going back over the baseball ground for an update on the scoreline. So yeah, 5-0. Terry Butcher's season kind of started off as it would continue. 2003, Kevin Phillips was transferred to Southampton for 3.25 million. Again, I think we mentioned this last week, where in terms of the actual money that Sunderland received, because there was money owing to Phillips and all that sort of stuff, we didn't really see much more than 2 million out of that deal, which was an awful lot less than we could have got a year or two earlier. 2010, Simon Mignolet, who Andrew's already brought up in conversation today.
Incorrectly.
Well, I didn't say that. You said that. Honora Bramble, El Mohammadi, Christian Riveros and Danny Welbeck all made their debuts in a home game against Birmingham. We were 2-0 up. I think Mignolet was a bit of a surprise call. Craig Gordon was injured. He just arrived at the club, a very young keeper at that point. We were 2-0 up pretty comfortably. Lee Catmull got sent off. I think Steve Bruce was very critical of Anthony Taylor, the referee, who was a very early stage referee at that point. I think he'd maybe only refereed 1 or 2 Premier League games before that, but Bruce was very critical of him afterwards. But yeah, Catmull got sent off with 2 yellow cards, and then Birmingham equalise, and that game finishes 2-2. But also on the 14th of August, 1997, Charlie Cannonball Fleming passes away, aged 70. Now, he was a Scottish centre-forward, Kelvin, who you'd like to delve into a little bit.
Well, there's a reason why this lad always catches me attention, and it's to do with me dad. And he told us decades ago, I'm going to tell you a story. Sit back and relax. I'll tell you a story here. So decades ago, I think in the 70s, my dad told us a tale about when he did his national service, and he had come back from national service in the mid-50s. And because all of his mates were doing the same thing, doing their national service, they had this sort of tradition that they had a day out when you returned from your national service. And my dad, who was a Newcastle fan, I think I've said that before, he was a toonie. Him and his mates would go to Newcastle to the derby. They were playing Sunderland, and my father was quite excited. He had been in the army, he had a pretty tough time on national service, and he was excited about this day out with his mates, excited to be going back to Newcastle. He was a big Jackie Milburn and Bobby Mitchell fan, were 2 of his favourite players. But another one of his favourite players was Shaq. And even though he went to Sunderland, my father always liked watching Shaq play, and always said he was one of the best ball players that he ever saw. So off they go at the game. He's quite excited, but when he gets there, the first disappointment was Shaq wasn't playing for Sunderland. But Sunderland have this new lad playing that nobody knows much about, don't really know much about him. But him and his mates are standing in the ground watching Sunderland warm up. And one of his mates calls this new player, says to him, he's like a confused ostrich running about there in the warm-up. And the game kicks off. And this confused ostrich proceeds to be a right bloody nuisance in the game and scores a goal just before half-time. And my fella's like, the boy that got a good laugh from all round about him at the start of the game, by this point, it's almost like it's his fault for singling the boy out, the confused ostrich. And I mean, everything he did, there were people shouting down to where they were standing, "Aye, that'll be a confused ostrich there," He had a stormer of a game, and so he scores just before half time, a good goal, and then Jackie Milburn scores for Newcastle right after half time. So my father and his pals are thinking, "Oh, we're back on track now. We're going to win this game." I think there was about 62,000 in the ground as well. It's a huge crowd, and that confused ostrich in the last minute of the game gets on the end of a Jack Headley free kick and spanks the ball into the back of the goal. And my father's mate, he says, his mate was almost trying to sneak away, so that nobody would blame him for the But that Confused Ostrich was Charlie Fleming. And the reason for describing him as that was one of his nicknames was Legs. And they called him that because he had this really odd running style. It was like a big loping running style, and I don't think my father ever forgave him for ruining his national service homecoming trip. But that's why this lad, it's funny the way that players and why certain games and certain players stick in your mind. And that's why Fleming, who was also called Cannonball Fleming, I think officially, or as far as I understand it, people either called him Legs Fleming or Cannonball Charlie was his nickname.
And the reason for that, Ostrich, I have to say.
Yeah. I mean, I could I've had a bit of fun in my head with the leap and running style and trying to match a Confused Ostrich into that, because it seems that style, it used to draw a lot of fouls, and he certainly was somebody who seemed to draw his fair share of free kicks and penalties. But my father used to say that that was because he used to go down awfully easy as well. So my dad was never going to forgive him for ruining his day. But this lad's got a great goal scoring record with us. He comes in February 1955, and it costs the club 20,000. And a good player called Tommy Wright goes in the opposite direction, East Fife. Now, Tommy Wright, even that was interesting when you're talking about sort of coincidences, because Tommy Wright was just about from the same area as Fleming in Fife, and had played for the same junior club as Fleming, Blairhall Colliery it was called. Then a very strong Fife junior team they were. But back goes Tommy Wright to East Fife, and to Sunderland comes Fleming to join his ex-East Fife pal, George Aitken, who was playing for Sunderland at the time as well, and was a very, very handy centre-half. There's a great article by Mark Metcalf, a Roker Report article on Fleming. If anybody is interested, he's got some great stats in terms of his goal scoring with us. But he's scoring goals at a rate of, he scores a goal every 150 minutes. Playing for us, he's scoring goals at 0.58 goals per game, basically.
Hey, Kelvin, when Charlie Fleming signs for us, he's 28 or so, isn't he? He's not a young lad who's coming. So he's had a long career in Scotland beforehand, hasn't he?
He played, that era that, and I know when you think now, a lot of people in England, when you mention the club East Fife, folk quite often will go East Fife 4-4-5, and the tongue twister for the football score presenter, But East Fife, he joined East Fife in 1947 in what's called their golden age. East Fife were a top 6 team in the Scottish top tier, and had a load of cracking players came through the club, and they were regularly top 4, top 6 League Cup winners in 47, 48, 49, 50, and 53, 54, and Fleming was with the club for most of that. And Scottish Cup finalists in 49-50. He played 173 times for East Fife and scored 117 goals, and he's a record goal scorer at East Fife. Still, he was a Scottish cap as well. He'd got one Scotland cap against Northern Ireland in 1953 and scored 2 goals, but never got another sniff at it, despite playing in a pretty high-profile East Fife team. He does come to Sunderland shortly after that, and for us, he plays 122 games and scores 71 goals between February 55 and July 1958. So he's a bit of an enigma, lots of goals. He doesn't just play centre forward. He quite often played what was called then inside right to accommodate Ted Purden, was playing centre forward for us at the time, and he was another lad. I'm sure he came from South Africa, Ted Purden. But he was scored a few goals for us as well. But he would quite often shuttle to the inside right position to accommodate Purden. But it didn't stop him from scoring goals, and he was noted for his assists as well. If we'd been counting that kind of metric at this time, I'm sure he would have figured pretty highly on that as well. I've looked up a few of the games, the high-profile games that he played in, and quite often you'll see that it's him that gets the touch before to the goal scorer as well. He wasn't just a goal scorer. So he had a fantastic career, as you say, at East Fife before he came. And I'm not sure whether George Aitken had anything to do with. He would be a senior pro in the team at the time, Aitken, and a player of some renown himself. So whether he had anything to do with that transfer, I don't know. But he links up with Aitken anyway. And by and large, those seasons that he comes, I mean, 54, 55, within that Newcastle game I was telling you about, I think that's his third game for, and he's scoring 2 goals and doing the business basically. But his style, his unusual running style, and he was a guy. I think he was 27, 28. You're right, Martin. But I would say he probably looked like he was about 40. One of these guys who, when he was 70, still looks like he's 40. Do you know what I mean? So receding hairline. I think he had a tooth missing in the front of his mouth, and he looked like he'd taken a few whacks in the course of his career. But he's 54, 55, 17 games, 6 goals, 2 goals in the run-up to the semi-final. People might recall we made the semi-final that year. Sunderland were hell-bent on getting to a cup final. And actually that year, I know Stan Anderson talks about that season and said, if we'd been a bit more focused on the league, we could have won it, because we finished 4th that year and fell away badly. And one of the people I mentioned him earlier, Shackleton, was really, really focused on getting to Wembley and getting to a cup final. I think he really wanted it on his CV, as did a lot of the other lads. But fell away, beaten by Man City 1-0 in the semis. So they come back the next season and don't they do it again? They go all the way to the semi-final and they beat 3-0 by Birmingham. But they beat Newcastle 2-0 on the way. And the follow-up to my dad's story is that game was at St. James's Park and Dad was at that game and says that bugger Fleming didn't score, but what a bloody nuisance he made of himself, He seemed like a guy who, if he was just walking past you, just his gait and his running gait and everything, he'd probably stand on your toe and poke you in the eye accidentally. Do you know, one of these lads, I always think when he used to talk about him, he'd be one of these boys who just couldn't help himself. If you were sitting getting your breakfast next to him, he'd spill his cornflakes all over you, Just one of these bloody characters, But he has a good season that season, 55, 56. He scores 32 goals and he's the runner-up in Nat Lofthouse in the top goal scorer in the top tier that year. And it's a hindsight thing for Fleming, but he misses out on being one of that rare breed that have the top goal scorer in the Scottish top tier and the top goal scorer in the English top tier on their CV. That's how good a goal scorer he was. He scored a lot of goals for Sunderland. We lose that semi-final in that year and fall away to 9th in the league, and then 56, 57, the wheels start to come off. The bad season. We just stay up. But he scores 27 goals in all competitions that season. So he's one of the players who's still doing business in a team that's failing badly. And then, of course, 57, 58, he's still there, but we do end up getting relegated. And he plays only 15 games that season and 3 goals. He was shipped out by Brown. Alan Brown decided that, Fleming wasn't his cup of tea. I think Brown wanted a more agricultural centre forward, and he bought, you mentioned him earlier, Don Rhino Kitchenbrand, who, Kitchenbrand, he scored goals. He came in and gave a good season or so in the second division, but he wasn't a top tier forward like Fleming had been. But he's still, comparatively speaking, a young fella. And in July 1958, he goes off to be player manager at Bath City, who are playing in the Southern Premiership, the equivalent of. Now, we've talked about this once before, and because I keep seeing that with players that they disappear down there. And I don't know whether they were governed by the same kind of minimal pay kind of restrictions. I think there was a bit of money to be made down in that division, because he's not the only sort of league player that's shuttling off down there and earning a living. But he goes as player manager, and he did at East 5.
Does he go as player manager? Because a few things I've read about him said he was signed by, I can't remember who the manager was, but he was buying players like Stan Mortensen, Tony Book, and other people.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen Fleming mentioned
that he was player manager. I wonder if you could be right, Martin. I wouldn't sort of bet a month's wages on that if I was still working. I wouldn't bet a month's wages with you on that. He definitely was player manager at some point.
Yeah.
There, but you're right. And it's interesting that you mentioned he played with Tony Book when he was there. For people that don't know Tony Book, he was a fantastic servant to Man City and a really good player in his day himself, Tony Book. But he played with Tony Book, and given all the great, Book played in a golden Man City team and with some great players, and given all those players that he played with, I think he's quoted as saying that there was nobody could time a ball like Charlie Fleming.
Yeah, right.
So that's fair praise indeed when you think of all the players Book would have played with. But anyway, off he goes to Bath. He becomes he's their record goal scorer. They win things, the league championship in 59-60. I think he scores 44 goals for him in that season. He's held in very high esteem down there. He also then goes to, in 1964, he goes across to Canada and plays for Toronto City and scores 19 goals for them in a league championship winning season as well. So he's a boy wherever he goes, The Confused Ostrich doesn't sound that confused to me. He seems to be able to go and score goals wherever he goes. He comes back to Bath after Toronto. He goes as player manager at Trowbridge. He finishes playing. He does a bit of coaching in Australia and America, and then retires. Now, it's interesting what you say about him passing away and why we're talking about him today, because when you look at the various sources that talk about him, some people have him passing away on the 15th of August and some on the 14th. The romantic in me says it would be nice if it was the 15th of August, 1997, because that was our very first game at the Stadium of Light. And it would have been a nice tie-up for a boy that scored a lot of goals for Sunderland. Yeah. One of the reasons why he was successful at Bath another little add-on, another little short story. He when he went there, he bought an ex-colleague down to Bath to play with him, called Bobby Black. Bobby Black was a very, very handy right winger for East Fife, and him and Black become quite potent for Bath. And does that name Bobby Black mean anything to you in another sporting context?
No, not.
No, doesn't. I hope if anybody's listening, it would be nice to think if somebody was listening to this, I would imagine Crown Green bowlers might be shouting at the screen, because Bobby Black was the All England Crown Green bowling champion.
Yeah, right.
And when you look at how players resurface and reinvent themselves, so obviously he was a player that still liked a bit of competition, still liked to put himself out there on the grass, just a different level of game. I thought it was a nice touch, that. And I remember watching Bobby Black. I didn't realise at the time, but I used to watch a bit of Crown Green bowling. He used to be on the telly a bit, and I always used to watch it because Scotland had good players who used to whoop the English.
Well, you've got to take it where you can find it, Kelvin, don't you?
Take it where I can find it, man. And Bobby Black was one of them.
This whole thing, Kelvin, was to just get us to that.
It's a long setup.
So I hope you enjoyed my story, you English lads.
No, it's a funny one with Charlie Fleming going to Bath, because it's always kind of puzzled me when you look at it, because Bath were Southern League, and I might be incorrect in this, but I think at the time there wasn't the pyramid system there is now, where you could actually get into the Football League. So they were playing way below in league terms where he had been playing, and he was still a relatively young footballer, maybe 31, wasn't he? So he had an awful lot of football left in him, as you can see with the number of games he played for Bath and the number of goals he scored for them. But yeah, it's probably that thing where the actual money he could earn there was probably in excess of what you could earn professionally at the time.
I
wondered as well, given what was happening at Sunderland, or about what had happened, I didn't know whether he was getting his head down and getting out the road before anybody.
I think, there's potentially an element of that, Kelvin. If nothing else, he was presumably on bigger wages than some of the younger players Brown was having to bring in. And particularly when you're player manager in a non-league team, you definitely are in line for a bigger wage, I would have thought. As Martin suggested, I don't know if he actually went down there initially as player manager, but he did. He was player manager of Bath for a period, and it might have been a case of, well, listen, come down here. There's other roles for you, and we can beef up your wage. But you're very right. I think the timing of it suggests that he perhaps knew things were going to turn sour at Sunderland, and time to get out. He was one of.
I'm pretty sure he was on that list of players from the Bank of England scandal, that list of initial players that were named as having taken under the counter payments. But I will check that out and come back and confirm that if I'm wrong. So a really interesting character, and the Confused Ostrich thing's always it's always stuck with us, and I kind of feel I would love to have seen him play.
Yeah.
But I might not have wanted to play against him, And me poor father never forgave him for ruining his national service homecoming. Me father, he used to, at the drop of a hat, whatever excuse he would say, he was like, bloody Charlie Fleming. Stop going on like Charlie Fleming.
It's funny as well when we mentioned Tony Buchan passing there, because that reminded me of when Man City moved stadiums and had a whole thing about, are we going to name the ends different things and name them after players? And there was a suggestion that one of them might be the bookend. And that was one of the suggestions. Another suggestion was to name one of the stands after Colin Bell, which,
Yeah.
which I'm not sure how much credibility that suggestion had or otherwise, but I do hope it was true.
They called him
Oh, go on.
I was just going to say, Bell. They did call him the king of the kipbacks, didn't they? He was a very highly regarded Durham boy, Colin Bell, wasn't he?
Was a local lad.
Yeah. Nijinsky. I always remember his nickname was Nijinsky. He was a cracking player to watch him. He was a lovely player.
Could very well have had a stand named after him, couldn't he?
Well, would they?
It makes the Metro FM stand at the stadium sound not quite as bad as it did at the time.
Indeed. Right, on that note, we will take another short break. We'll be back with you very soon. Welcome back to On This Week, and we are delving in to the 15th of August, 1987. Keith Bircham scored Sunderland's first ever goal in the third division of English football, and we won 1-0 at Brentford. I think he scored the last goal last season as well away at Rotherham, didn't he? He had quite a nice record then. We spoke about Keith Bircham's return to Roker Park a week or two ago in an awful game from a Sunderland perspective with Walsall. But yeah, for all of the headlines, Grayson and Gabbiadini got that season. Keith Bircham scored the first and last goals. 1996, Niall Quinn signed for the club from Man City. And a year later, he scored the first goal at the Stadium of Light, with Kevin Phillips also scoring his debut in that game against Man City. So there was another nice little bit of symmetry there. 2007, we're kind of going from one extreme to the other here. Greg Halford and Roy O'Donovan made debuts for Sunderland. Away at Birmingham, Michael Chopra scored again. So that was 2-2 for Chopra in a 2-2 draw at Birmingham. And we got an equaliser in the last minute with Stern John sitting on Colin Doyle, I think, in the Birmingham goal to get a bit of ire from Steve Bruce. 2 years later, Steve Bruce was in charge of Sunderland as we beat Bolton 1-0 away. I think last week Gav described this team as Sunderland's Harlem Globetrotters. I'm not sure if that's a little bit of an overstatement or not, but Darren Bent, Lorik Sarna, Lee Cattermole and Fraser Campbell all debuted as we won 1-0. And in 2015, it was the first home game of that season. Dick Advocat was in charge. Yann M'Vila made his debut. I think, didn't Yann M'Vila he got sent off midweek before that? He played a reserve game and he laid the nut on somebody in the reserve game, and he played in this game, got beat 3-1 off Norwich, and Duncan Watmore scored for us. But Yann M'Vila is always another one of those what ifs in Sunderland history, isn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought this lad had the goods. I mean, just a player who I couldn't understand why we didn't go all out for him. I honestly used to. I mean, I don't mind having a bit of a debate with people about players, but I never understood fans that used to say, "Oh, he's rubbish, I didn't like him." Say, what are you watching? It could raise my temperature a bit when talking about this lad if folk weren't on board. I thought he was a cracking player.
Given your admission about David Moyes, it does bring me to question whether Yann M'Vila was very good or not.
I think.
Shut up, you.
I think one of the things that went against M'Vila at the start was this reputation. I was at that reserve game. I still go to a lot of games at Appleton even now. And I remember thinking there'd been some sort of story, hadn't there, that he turned up at training at his former club with an axe because he wanted to settle a score, or there was some sort of carry on. And then you're watching a reserve team game and he's getting sent off for headbutting somebody. Everybody's just thinking, flipping heck, we have signed an absolute head the ball here. This lad is just away on a different planet. So I think people started with this idea that he's a liability. But yeah, Kelvin, I thought once he got going in the first team, he was amazing. And if you want to see my heartbroken face, like we've seen from Martin earlier, MV is a good way to mention it, a good way to get that response, because I just thought that was the perfect example of muddled thinking by the club. We had, I honestly think, a world-class player desperate to come to Sunderland, to the point where he's on his social media pleading with the club to sign him. And we don't do it because we think we might save a couple of million, all the while happy to waste millions on other players. Just,
desperate at the time, wasn't it?
You might have lost me for the rest of the episode, because that was just a real sorry period.
It would have been. You can play, as I do from time to time. I play around with players from different eras and what have you, and players that didn't play together. But I've often thought, what would Kevin Ball, Lorik Sana, and Yann M'Vila
pretty tasty midfield, isn't it?
Yeah, bit of culture there. Did he turn up at his old club with the axe because he'd heard he was for the chop, Andrew?
Kelvin, man. Oh, again, I wish people could see, because when Kelvin's winding up for one of these, because he gets this little glint in his eyes and he looks so happy with himself. Oh, it's one of those things, you can see it happening, but there is nothing you can do to stop it.
That's right.
Kelvin's gonna get his gag out, and he's still pulling his little face there. He's just a cheeky little chappy who likes winding us up. We love you really. We love you really, Kelvin.
I wish he turned up with an axe a couple of years later.
Oh, God.
Might have stopped David Moyes coming in, mightn't
he? Give him time. Give him time.
I think muddled thinking was a very, very polite way to describe what was going on at the club at the time.
Aye. No, it was tough. It was tough. Harder, almost. I don't know about you lads, but at the time, I remember thinking, who's got that finger on the pulse here at the moment? Is it as bad as what I'm thinking it is? And then looking back on it, it's actually worse.
It is.
Kelvin, can I stop you there, Kelvin? You've cheered me back. I was down. I was upset. You've cheered us up with your little gag there. I might politely suggest we don't go too deep into this era now, because we will all be devastated.
Oh, God. Well, it wasn't me that mentioned Moyes. It was bloody Martin.
You mentioned him on that blooming radio show, defending him all those years ago. Now I know that about you, Kelvin. I've changed my opinion on you.
I Heart David Moyes tattoo that he's bloody got.
I've never shown you that.
That was on a different website.
It was. I've heard about it. I've heard about it. Oh, I see. It's all descending without Chris, isn't it? We better get back on track. August the 16th, 1964, Barry Venison was born. And depending on what you read, he was born in Stanley, he was born in Concert, but he was certainly born in County Durham. A local lad, played an awful lot, right back midfield. I remember in 1992, when we played the cup final against Liverpool at Wembley, Barry Venison was a Liverpool player at the time, and again, he's one who I just missed, but again, reading the sticker books, signed from Sunderland, so you're paying him more attention than other players. And I remember him coming up to us in the end behind the goal at Wembley, and he was waving at everybody before the match, and he was giving the fist up and everything like that. Liverpool obviously win the game. 2 weeks later, he bloody signs for the Mags, doesn't he? With Paul Bracewell as well. So that sullied his reputation in red and white territory, I think.
I've always I always wondered what his allegiances were, and spoken
I don't know,
to lads that obviously I live in that neck of the woods now, and I've spoken to lads about who knew him. But I think he was a Sunderland fan, but I don't know that for sure. But he's
Kelvin. Are you not just waiting any minute now for the venison? He was very dear or some sort of joke along those lines. So do you just want to get that in now before any other points you want to make about him? Very expensive. He was there. Sorry, I've just completely derailed you there, Kelvin. Go on.
No, you're learning, Andrew. No, come on. He was a good player. He was a good player for us. He was a good young lad coming through. Him and Pickering together, it was exciting to have two young lads like that coming through. It had me harking back to the late 60s, early 70s, and the whole clutch of young players that came through then. I was very excited about them two lads, and really thought if we could have hung on to them. I think right from the off with Pickering and Venison and the period we'd been through, I really did feel there's a good chance somebody was going to come in and whip them players away. If we didn't get our act sorted out, these were good young players who obviously had top tier quality in them. So, but Venison, yeah.
Was he the youngest captain of a Wembley team? I'm sure he captained us in the Milk Cup final. And that just goes to show what you're saying about what a quality player he was, to have that responsibility put on him.
Well, it also, he didn't play well, but not many of the team did play well on that Milk Cup final day. I think Chris Turner, you could probably, if it hadn't been for him, one thing, it does give us a chance to mention somebody who you mentioned earlier, Gordon Chisholm, who many may remember that it was an own goal, that it was Asa Hartford that had the shot, and Hartford would have enjoyed that because I think it was 68, 69, he'd been playing for West Brom's youth team against our youth team in the Youth Cup final and had gotten sent off. They'd tanked with 3-0 at their place and they came to ours, and him and Jim Holton got sent off and we beat them 6-0. So Hartford had his revenge, but Chisholm, he'd a pithy sense of humour, Gordon Chisholm. And he always said about that, he says, I had all my family there, loads of friends down from Glasgow. And he says, there it was, my name up in lights in the stadium. Gordon Chisholm, OG. I've often thought of that he was, you're playing your game, you're trying to get back into the game, and there it is, flashing up in Wembley.
Is it fair to say he was another one, Kelvin? You mentioned Venison and Pickering. I seem to think Chisholm came through. I know he was from Scotland originally, but I think he came through the ranks. He was part of the Roker youth setup. So another player who, like you say, just was part of this clutch of very talented prospects we had at one point.
Oh, yeah. He came, it is interesting, all this. Sorry, you've set me away now. He came from one of our feeder clubs in Scotland called Possil YM. And when he came, he didn't play that many. I don't think he played that many youth team games, as I recall. And he was a fixture in our team from being 18 years old. Gordon Chisholm. He was a really good, steady lad. Him. I thought he was harshly done to in '85, but I mean that was Laurie McMenemy. Wanted his own players in. And off Chiz went to Hibernian and did well with them. He had a canny career in Scotland as a coach, And the other thing, you've set me away now about him. The other thing I remember about Chisholm was didn't he come back to Sunderland as the National Development Officer or something? And he was, I seem to remember this.
Yes. That rings a bell. Something you've set me off as well, Kelvin. Go on, I'll let you make your point first. Sorry.
As I remember this, it's a funny that I remember from him. Like there I was at Wembley, me names up in lights. You could sort of pithy sense of humour that I quite like. And as I remember it, he got this job as the National Development Officer for Sunderland at the time, about 2012, I'm going to say. And he was traveling, or he was going all over the place, Africa a lot, I think South Africa, Ghana, places like that, as I remember. And he, why it stands out was he was asked how the job was going. I think it was one of the Scottish broadsheets that I used to buy, and I'm going to say to you it was Johnny Colquhoun that was interviewing him, but it wasn't. I'd be embellishing that. And in the report, he's talking about the job and saying, "I'm all over the country." He says it's very exciting. He says, I went to his session the other day because he had this remit for spotting good young players and getting Sunderland's brand name out there. It's coming back to me. That was his remit. And he said, I went to his session and there were 6 and 7 year olds playing. And he says, the levels of skill were fantastic. He says, do you know, these kids couldn't tie their shoelaces, but they were doing Cruyff turns and everything. He's just a lad that he could see the sort of humorous and funny side of things. I don't think he saw the funny side of Laurie McMenemy, though. He was another lad that should have. I thought he had another couple of seasons in him for us. He was a very versatile player as well.
Yeah, that I think that's very well remembered about the whole role he had after retiring from play, and you've done well to drag that up, Kelvin, because that does now ring a bell. But you talk about how he was unlucky after 85 and the way McMenemy treated him. This is perhaps a different episode altogether, and I know Martin needs to go to bed at some point, so I'll make this point quickly. That the whole aftermath of that Milk Cup final was dreadful for Sunderland. This should have been. This was a club that had been in the top flight for a few seasons, had established itself, and it should have been a highlight that we've got to this cup final. First time we've got to the League Cup final. You had the fallout from West being sold a couple of days afterwards. You had the terrible treatment of David Corner afterwards. Absolutely appalling, the response to a young lad who was thrown in at the deep end. You know, we'd missed a penalty. We'd conceded an own goal. We suddenly then, by the end of the season, we end up being relegated in pathetic fashion. McMenemy comes in and is a disaster. You lose players like Chisholm because he falls out with them and all this type of thing. It's something that I always look at that cup run and read about the happy memories and the famous game against Chelsea at Roker Park, and all those games Turner had. And yet it seems that actually getting to the final, the way the club after that just fell apart, it was a real shame and a real downturn in our history for the second half of the 80s.
What's interesting that is somebody that was around for all that. And I do want to say one thing. You know, the 85 League Cup final, never was Sunderland fans portrayed in the very, very best light at that final. We were fantastic. I was so proud to be one of that horde that day, because we were absolutely fantastic that day in 1985. But the fans turned up, but the team didn't. And a bit like when we were talking about Charlie Fleming before, this, you know, the 2 semi-finals in the mid-50s with the Bank of England scandal on the way did for us then as well. You know, it triggered and tripped the club into a spiral that we really struggled to get out of. On paper, Laurie McMenemy was a very, very good decision. He was a top manager at the time. That I don't care what people. I'm definitely one of those buggers that's wise in hindsight. But at the time, I was as excited as anybody about Laurie McMenemy coming in, you know, and
really as bad as you, David Moyes.
I was going to say, did you call up the radio station?
Do you want to warm up to this?
Do you know what? You steal one bloody sheep and it just gets bloody hell. I'm not telling you anything ever again.
The cup final, Kelvin. We spoke about the 73 cup final and the funny story about the boots having to get painted over because we received money from
Painted
Sky.
over.
Yeah. I seem to think in 1985 there was other disputes about money, but whereas in 73 they made a bit of a joke of it and it ended up being part of the folklore. In 85, I think that caused a lot of disgruntlement as well. I think there was disputes
there was
over
things going on in the background, wasn't there?
Yeah.
I think the players were quite unhappy about where the wives, there was even things like this, the tickets that the families got for the stadium. I think when
I remember,
the Norwich team families were up front and central and the Sunderland families were away back somewhere, I think there was an issue about the number of tickets people were given. I think Ashurst had come in and was trying to rule with an iron fist, and there's lots of things that you can be wise in hindsight, can't you? It gives you a 20/20 vision, but he made some mistakes coming in, but then you'd say Laurie McMenemy was a mistake, but you wouldn't. At the time, you would think, this is what we need. We need somebody like this to galvanise the club. And
we talked last week about McMenemy coming in, and it was interesting when you kind of track the timelines because it was 2 or 3 or 4 weeks after the season finished. Len Ashurst was still actually in charge. He came back of his holidays and got his P45. But, the season before, McMenemy had been on the verge of taking over Man United and had a last-minute change of heart. He'd been wanted by Arsenal. Don Howe got the job at Arsenal because McMenemy turned them down. He was only 48 or 49. So it's not as if you're appointing somebody who's at the tail end of his career. He should have been coming into the prime of his managerial career. Lebris is the same age as McMenemy was when McMenemy came to Sunderland now. So, you could, somebody, not me, but somebody could make an argument to say that what was going on behind the scenes in terms of the club being really badly ran. We had the Tom Cowie stuff, Barry Beattie stuff going on in the background. You could make an argument that it wasn't necessarily all McMenemy's fault there.
Oh no, because we still had you're right, the Barry Beattie Cowie kind of, I think a lot of people looking back on that now realise how that scuppered the club. It really damaged the club for a good number of years. And if I remember rightly, McMenemy wasn't employed just as the manager, wasn't he? Didn't he have
managing director?
That's right. Yeah. I and my sense of that was he's going to come in and overhaul the club and do the job that he did at Southampton, making them, a club and a good club, a well-run club, and with the added bonus that surely we were, and what I always used to think of this, that we were a far bigger club than Southampton in potential. No slight to Southampton, but there's a lot of things, isn't there, that you look back on and think that was where it started to go wrong.
I'm dead with you there, Kelvin. Obviously, I was too young to really appreciate what was going on at the time, but looking back on it, I just think that whole era is just full of regrets and just unfortunate sets of circumstances, all contributing to a really grim period. Anyway, do I need Kevin Phillips again to lift the mood, or somebody else?
Well, I was going to say, having said all that, I don't think McMenemy was much cop really as well. I think I remember talking to Ruben Agbula for a podcast a few years ago now, and he'd obviously been in Southampton under McMenemy, and for a few years he'd been trying to get out because of McMenemy. He'd come to Sunderland in the January or so of 85. We get relegated, so he's got relegated for the first time in his career. He'd been touted for England as a sweeper and all sorts. gets relegated. Then Ashurst, and Andy's cup tied as well, so he misses out on the cup run. Then Ashurst gets sacked. And of course, who comes in? Laurie McMenemy. And you think, oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
but, the other story that always makes me chuckle from McMenemy's era at Sunderland is one I think Eric Gates told, where McMenemy's desperate for them to get some confidence and some wins under the belt and all that sort of stuff. So in training, they play a game against nobody. So they play a game and they just want to work on shape. So they want to get in position, pass the ball, knock a few goals in. Somebody passes the ball back to Ian Hessford. Ian Hessford's not looking and it rolls into the net and they're getting beat 1-0. And Eric Gates goes, Jesus Christ, we can't even beat a team of nobody.
That reminds me of a similar story about Alan Brown had these fantastic sort of innovative training ideas. And I think one of the things he used to do was get the players playing what he called shadow football. So you weren't actually playing against anybody.
Yeah.
It always, my Newcastle friends, if ever I was telling a story like that, and they'd always like straight in there with the shadow team 1-5-1, and stuff like that.
We haven't said this in a while, gents, and I think I need to say this to get us back on track. This is all just typical Sunderland. The How the podcasts on this week catchphrase of
the mantra.
Typical.
In fact, you know what? That could have been a good name for the podcast, couldn't it? Typical Sunderland.
Yeah, that would have worked.
We'll get back on track. 1973, August 16th, Chelsea came to Roker Park for the opening game of the season. Pop Robson and Dennis Longhorn scored in a 2-1 win. 1980, one of Kelvin's favourite players, Sam Allardyce, made his debut in our first game back in the top flight, beat Everton 3-1. 2003, Michael Gray made his last appearance for Sunderland. After almost 11 years after his debut, he played in a 1-0 home defeat against Millwall. And I think that was the season after we got relegated with 15 points, wasn't Mick McCarthy was in charge, and Gray was obviously one of the players who the club wanted to move on to try to save some money and get a bit of money in. I always remember his first... He made his debut away at Derby. Is my memory correct there? And the following weekend, he started against Barnsley at home at Roker Park. And we were... it was me and my dad and a couple of me mates in the Fulwell end, right at the back sort of cage of the Fulwell end to the right-hand side when you walked in on the barriers there. And one of the lads, Phil Johnson, had bought a massive mug from the club shop, which he had in his big pocket. It must have been December. It must have been December time. Like, he had this big mug in his pocket. And we were right up against the barriers and he goes, this mug's going to be fucked it. If we score in the first minute, this mug's seen it. So, of course, Mickey Gray lobs it in the first minute against Barnsley. So we're all celebrating. We're all trying to crush him and his mug against the barrier as well. But it actually did survive, which is testament to the quality of the merchandise from the Sunderland club shop. I send my free mug over next week. Thank you.
Is this another one of these adverts, Martin? You've said you're going to drop into the pod. Is this another...
Hey, that was a good one. You hear that when you just drop it in naturally and you have a...
Yeah. Oh, it was beautiful. Yeah. You couldn't see the seams.
Seamless link. Right, we're 2008. We start the season with a 1-0 defeat at home to Liverpool. Chimbonda, Tainio Malbranc and El Hadj Diouf. We got beat 1-0 off Liverpool at the Stadium of Light. 2014, we start the season with a Lee Cattermole goal, which is a bit of a rarity away at West Brom. Patrick Van Aanholt, Jack Rodwell, Georgie Gomez and Will Buckley made their debuts for the club on that day.
That was a very good goal, if I remember rightly.
It was a very good goal, wasn't it? Didn't get too many of them in the top flight anyway, but no, he's took that away all right. August the 17th, going back to 1896, our first ever manager, Tom Watson, left the club to become manager of Liverpool. We talked about Tom Watson in one of the very first episodes of On This Week that we did, but yeah, he had a a long career at Sunderland and a very successful career as Liverpool manager subsequently. And again, we've just touched upon 1985, and on August 17th, it was Laurie McMenamin's first game in charge. And last week, if you listened to that pod, we talked about the sort of saga of Eric Gates actually joining the club, and everybody came to the ground, to Roker Park, to see us take on Bobby Saxton's Blackburn. Looking forward to seeing the new strike force of Eric Gates and Dave Swindlehurst score a boatload of goals, and we got beat 2-0, and I don't think anybody managed a goal for the first 6 games or 7 games of the season, did they? So it wasn't a successful start to the campaign. 1993, now we played Chester in a League Cup tie, and we beat them 3-1. Don Goodman scored 2 goals. One of them was a rebound from a penalty. But a loanee who we've already mentioned today got I think their only goal for Sunderland that day. And we've talked about him a little bit before, I think. But actually, Rob Mason was talking about him, wasn't he, on the pod a few weeks ago? Lee Power, who I thought looked a really good player at the time when he joined on loan from Norwich. But he was another who came for a very brief spell and then disappeared again. 1996, and again, this was a year after the game that we started talking about earlier on. Andrew was talking about the home game against Leicester City at the start of the season. Both of us went up, and the following season, the season opener is Sunderland versus Leicester. And we had another one more debutant than we had the season before, because Tony Courton and Niall Quinn made their debuts in our first ever Premier League game. Now, that was a goalless draw, so we did a little bit better than we did the season before. And it was the first time that we could name 5 subs. So I remember Niall Quinn coming off the bench and nearly winning this game for us. He had a looping header in the Roker end, the back post, that I just dropped over the crossbar. He came on as sub. I think that was that's all I can really remember from that game. I can't remember a great deal else. It wasn't terribly eventful, I don't think.
I kind of have a sense of that, Martin. I remember the angle that I was watching that from. We all thought it was in round about us, and we're up, and we're kind of getting pelt as from the Leicester fans for jumping up, and it was probably the most enjoyable element of the game for them. I do remember it as a hard fought duo kind of contest. As I remember, Leicester didn't have a great season that season, did they?
A better season than us, I think, did we?
I think is this not the time, I think, when maybe Martin O'Neill gets involved around this time, and they win a couple of Coca-Cola Cups, maybe?
Well, they go on to have a really successful team, because Martin O'Neill's in charge. So when you go back, and again, this is kind of joining up conversations, isn't it? Because Mark McGee was in charge of Leicester the season earlier when we played them. And as I mentioned, he went to Wolves to replace Graham Taylor. Wolves were splashing the cash, and he obviously thought there was a bigger chance of going up with them. And Mark McGee was a very highly rated manager at the time. Martin O'Neill had been Wycombe manager for quite a while. And he had got the Norwich job. And very quickly, so he got the Norwich job at the start of that season. Very quickly, he had a falling out with Norwich and left. And he went into Leicester. So you come back to the first game of this season, Martin O'Neill's in the dugout at Roker Park as Leicester manager. Casey Keller, Don Goodman's favourite goalkeeper, is in goal for Leicester. Kevin Poole, who we mentioned earlier, is on the bench for Leicester. Simon Grayson's playing right back with slightly less hair than he had the season before. But one of the standout things for me here, we touched upon this in a previous one, but we didn't make many signings that season. But what Peter Reid tried to do was go for experience. So he signed Tony Courton and Niall Quinn. Those were the 2 big signings, weren't they? And within 5 or 6, 7 games, both of them, or maybe a little bit longer, but both of them were crocked. And Quinny got crocked, did his knee against Coventry at home, which was maybe the 6th or 7th game of the season. And Tony Courton broke his leg terribly away at Southampton, 10th game in, and I'm still convinced if one of them hadn't got injured, we don't go down that season.
I tend to agree with that, Martin. I think, we were very unfortunate because we did only just get relegated on the last day, and famously we were the first team to go down, having achieved 40 points, I believe. Yeah. We did give it a real good go that season, and there were definitely games where had we just had that little bit more top flight experience, we would have picked up points and done enough. I look back on that season. Like I said, as you mentioned at the top of this episode, the previous season was probably my favourite one supporting Sunderland. The follow-up season, I look back on kind of bittersweet because we were a good side, and I think we did deserve to stay in the top flight back then. Right. And again, like so many things, you think, had we stayed up, would the whole course of Sunderland's history changed? You never know.
Well, that's right. We talked a little bit last week about Reid's reluctance that season to give the likes of Craig Russell, Michael Bridges, Martin Smith more time on the field because they had so much ability and potential to score goals, which is what we really kind of end up lacking. But you know what? If you're going to bring this round full circle and put a smile on your face, if we don't go down that season, we don't see Kevin Phillips in Sunderland shirt.
Yeah.
So, you can take a positive out of that, looking back in retrospect, can't you?
Well, we need to end with a smile on our face because we've mentioned some pretty unpopular characters today.
I think we've finishing off on Kevin Phillips. I think we've.
That's not a bad place.
It's not a bad place.
The thing I was going to ask about that season, I don't know if you can remember, a lad I always had a bit of time for was Alex Ray.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Reid bought him that season for, was it $1 million? Did he?
It was.
Yeah, he paid good money for him, but he didn't. I don't have a recollection of him playing an awful lot that season.
He did, and it was a funny one, wasn't it? Because he came in as a goal-scoring central midfield player. He played a lot in Millwall. He had a bit of a fiery reputation. I think he was actually suspended for the first game of the season with a suspension hanging over from his Millwall days. And Reid was very set on Kevin Ball and Paul Bracewell in the centre midfield. And he never really gave Alex Ray that much of a chance to play in his favourite position. If he did play, he sort of played almost off a striker. But he didn't play too much. We all know about Alex Ray's kind of off the field problems that he publicly battled the season after, and whether there was something going on in the background there or wherever, it's plausible, but I don't know. But again, I mentioned earlier players who you just know you can see have goals in them.
Yes,
and Bridges, Craig Russell, Martin Smith, Alex Ray, another one. Just they've got goals in them, and there was so, as you mentioned, Andrew, there's so many games that season that were so tight. There was 1 or 2 times we got turned over, but I think there was a 6-2 at Chelsea, wasn't there, and maybe one other. But we didn't get hammered in many games. They were often tight defeats, and our Spurs at home was the other one that sticks in my memory. That was Stefan Everson turned us over that day, but there wasn't that many where we did get truly stuffed, and we were just missing a few goals. And as it turned out, if we got 1 or 2 more, literally 1 or 2 more points, we stay up, don't we? But anyway, Kevin Phillips.
What a roller coaster we've been on.
Absolutely.
Been highs and lows, and now you've come in with reminding me about that Spurs game, which was an absolute kick in the teeth, that one. So yeah, well done. I'm back down now, Martin.
You know what?
Pleased with yourself.
The Spurs game, right? So this shows you how loyal you've got to be. So the Spurs game, I was at university in Leeds. I was travelling up for every game. I travelled up on Tuesday night to the Spurs game. And if my memory serves me correctly, which I think it does, we were playing Manchester United at home on the Saturday. So I came out of the Spurs game really pissed off. I go to my dad, there's no way I'm coming back up here on Saturday to watch that shite. So I stayed out in Leeds and I missed probably the best home game of the season.
No.
So that just shows you perseverance gets its rewards.
Yeah. Oh, that was a great game as well.
See, we can end on the positive now, can't we? There you go. Excellent. Right. Well, I think, remembering that lovely game against Manchester United that we haven't mentioned and did not occur on this week, but we'll bask in that reflected glory anyway. So we will pull the plug there. So thank you for listening. And if we have triggered any memories, or we've got anything wrong, or there's anything that we've covered that you want to get in touch about, please do email us at howaythepodcastsafc@gmail.com. We will be back next week, and Andrew has a couple of hints at somebody who we will be covering, or something that we'll be covering in our episode at the start of next week.
Yes, cheers, Martin. We've danced around it a few times. Last week's quiz question you very kindly did on my behalf. I was unavailable last week. The clues from the previous episode was a player who was born in Dublin in 1966 and had famously said that Sunderland got under his skin. That was, of course, Niall Quinn, who signed for us, as we've said, on This Week in Sunderland History in 1996. A year later, he scored in our first Stadium of Light competitive game against Man City. Niall Quinn is a player that we genuinely could talk about for hours because his role in Sunderland's history is just unrivaled, you could say.
He's the second best striker to ever play for Sunderland at the Stadium of Light, isn't he?
And do you know what? That is not even anywhere near his biggest achievement for us. Again, these circles we keep going in because I'm sure it was a Mr. Kevin Phillips that was first in that list.
I suspect
so, he's had his name dropped in a few times. And again, he's another one, lads, that we could have a whole series of podcasts talking about. But yes, so Niall Quinn was the one who we hinted at last week because he featured prominently in our history between the 11th and the 17th of August. Next time you listen to us, we will be talking about the 18th to the 24th of August. Now, this player fits into that because he made his competitive debut for Sunderland on the 21st of August. I'm not going to say the year because I think that's too big of a clue, but I will say that I think Kelvin will appreciate talking about this player next week. I know we've groaned at your jokes, Kelvin, but we love you really, and we like it when we get first-hand experience of some of these players, and that little cheeky face of yours lights up with the memories of talking about players from this era. So yeah, he made his debut 21st of August. His first appearance at Roker Park had actually been 4 years earlier when he was playing during his national service. So you've mentioned your dad's national service and his memories around that. This player also had to do a stint of national service in the army. His best performance, however, was not at Roker. It took place at Wembley. And another little clue about who we're going to be talking about, his middle name is, there goes that cheeky face again as Kelvin's smiling. His middle name, quite interestingly, was Curran. So there you go. Middle name of Curran is quite unusual, but that's somebody we're going to chat about next time out.
Excellent. We will all look forward to that. So in the meantime, keep an eye on all of the podcast feeds coming out. We've got pods every day in the run-up to Saturday's big kickoff. And of course, keep coming back to rokerreport.sbnation.com for all of the news and views and opinions and all of the build-up to the West Ham game on Saturday. Until then, it is goodbye from all of us. Right, on that note, we're going to take a very short break. We'll be back very soon. We're going to drop an advert in there, so we'll...
For Prozac or something.
Well, it could be. It's good to talk.
No, it's not.
Right, we will take another short break. We'll be back with you very soon. You're right, Kelvin.
Oh my God, some things just really tickle my sense of humour, stuff like that.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.